Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's class for easy steps for drawing realistic hair. I'm your instructor, Adrienne Hodge, and tonight's class is 90 minutes long, and we will be covering um, 4 easy steps for drawing realistic hair. And just keep in mind that if you are a beginner artist, that you can very much follow along with what we're doing. But if you get stuck at any point, there will be a recording that you can refer back to tomorrow. You can find it on YouTube and you can pause it, slow it down, fast forward, etc. So that's always an option if there are parts of the class that are a struggle for you, then you can just keep up as much as you can, and then you always have that option to watch the playback. And next week's class is a part one of a two-part class using Artist Loft alcohol-based markers that you can find at Michael's. And we'll be breaking down how to blend with those alcohol-based markers and doing some lovely little studies of a peach blossom tree. Had to look up, I think it's a peach blossom. I had to look up the type of tree that I photographed and zoomed in on for that class. So I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully you'll join me for those two classes that are coming up the next couple of weeks. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my tabletop view and go over supplies, and we'll get started here. And I've just got my little Zoom thing in my way at the moment for some reason. I put it right there over the video button. Okay, so don't forget to tag your work with the hashtags Make It With Michaels or Michaels Classes wherever you post about your artwork, and you can find me online by going to my link tree. And if that is a little funny the way the dot is in Linktree, you can just search on Google for Linktree and Adrienne Hodge, and it should come up, and you'll find all my links to find me everywhere online and see. I even have a link to sign up for the next Michael's class, all that fun stuff. And here's a couple of my business cards with some of my artwork that I drew using calligraphy ink. All right, so pretty basic class tonight. We're just using the Artist Loft graphite pencils that you can find at Michael's. Some of mine are a little beat up here, but they work. These are ones that I share with my students in in-person classes. So I've got several of those, and you're definitely going to want some heavy B pencils for tonight because we're going to be doing a lot of darker value here. So if you're looking at your pencils and you only have like a 2B, you want to have something that's like a 4B or a 6B, or even better would be an 8B, or I've even got a 12B here. So something that's going to give us these nice, heavy, soft lines is good. And then I've got an Artist Loft eraser, got a kneaded eraser here. And I am using an Artist Loft drawing pad, 9x12. We've got a couple of them here, so I've got a new one that I'm using. These drawings are actually on the last pages of the old one. And then I included some reference photos for tonight of hair. So we've got this photograph of my son, his little man bun here, and I've got it in color, I've got it in black and white, and then I've got the inverted version of that photograph. Okay, so those are the supplies that we'll be using. And you should have, even if you're watching later on YouTube, you can access that printout by going to the area underneath the video where it has the class description, and it will say more and 3 dots, and you click on that and it'll show you the supply list, and it'll have the link to download the PDF. So if you're just finding this video on YouTube and want a copy of that reference photo, that's where you can find it. I am just going to get one of these pencils a little more sharpened here. Okay, so I'm gonna flip to the other page. Actually, I think I'm gonna tear the pages out of the sketchbook so that I don't have to flip around here. I should have probably done that already. Talk about all these steps, these 4 steps that we're gonna follow. I have them all drawn out separately. Okay, so here is step 1. Hopefully that is coming across on the screen. I know we sometimes have a battle with the lighting on Zoom, and oops, I was going to move my light a little bit and I realized my camera is attached to the light. So hopefully that's showing up pretty good here. Let me see if I can get it against the glare. There we go. So the first step that we're going to be doing is we're going to draw the entire shape of the hair, and then we're going to look at the contour lines of the hair shape. And then step 2 is we are going to look at the highlights of the hair. So all of the highlighted shapes, and those are going to follow the contours as we sketch those out. They're going to follow those elevational curves that we're going to sketch out in step 1. And you can combine all of these. You don't have to do 4 separate drawings. And then step 3 is going to be looking at the low lights or the dark shadows of the hair. And those are also going to follow those contours, those contour lines. They're going to follow those elevational shifts. And then step 4, it's just ta-da! It's just magically, it's going to draw itself after that, because we're going to know where those highlighted shapes are. We're going to know where the dark shadows are. So it's just going to be a matter of adding that soft value that follows those contours and matches the level of value that we're seeing in the image. Easy, right? Okay, so hair is definitely one of those things that a lot of people struggle with, like a lot of different subject matter related to portraits. And the main thing that I see people doing, I've been teaching adults for 10 years, and so I see a lot of the same issues coming up again and again with certain subject matter. And the thing that people kind of instinctively do when it comes to drawing hair is they want to draw uh every separate strand of hair. Like they start out, I'm going to just get a blank piece of paper here and just show you some of the things that I see novice artists doing when it comes to hair. So the biggest thing would be just this action, like just drawing every individual strand and hoping for the best. Okay. And that usually doesn't pan out too well. And then that's kind of it. That's kind of the thing that I see people doing when they're like, I just have no idea. Like, how do you draw hair? They got to help me. And it's like, well, just like drawing anything else, you want to look at the light. The light is telling you everything you need to know. As always, that's what I'm always saying. But there are a couple of things that are not super intuitive when it comes to drawing hair. That's why we have this class. And so the main idea that we're starting with here with step number 1 is we're looking for the overall shape of the hair. So we want to think about the silhouette of the hair. If we were to, create a silhouette or a shadow of the hair, have a really strong light that was casting a shadow from somebody's hair onto the wall, what does that empty shadow shape look like? So let's start with that. And I'm gonna probably do this way again. I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna draw them all separately, and then in my last drawing, I will put it all together. So I don't think we will have the issues that we had if you were in the drawing teeth class last week, where a lot of people were having trouble getting started, because since this drawing is going to end up pretty dark in the end, I'm going to go ahead and go pretty dark with my first lines. Okay, so step one, I'm using an 8B pencil just so that my lines show up nice and dark on the zoom, but you start with whatever pencil is going to help you get the lightest lines, like an H pencil, and start out super soft so you can easily erase, because you might not get this shape on the first try, and I might not either. So we'll just see what we can do. All right, so first we're looking for, let's go really simple here. Let's start with an oval shape for the bun, on the hair, because it does create kind of an oval. So it's kind of an oval stacked on a cereal bowl, but the cereal bowl is going to be tilted. Okay, so we're just going to do a cereal bowl shape with a big oval on top of it. And I might flip to, I've got a new sketchbook here, so I'm like, I'll burn up some paper. It's not a big deal. So I can make sure all my lines are visible for y'all tonight. Okay, so we'll start with that to help us find the shape that we're going for. And then we'll try to get a little more specific. I'm gonna flip to a new page. And this time I'm gonna just, so you might not see my lines because I'm gonna draw them kind of lightly, but I might start with those lines, and then I'm gonna start to look for the actual shape that I see within that oval shape that creates the oval. And so it's kind of a lot like another little cereal bowl here, kind of like this, like a little kidney bean, and I'm leaving it a little open right there. And then we've got that cereal bowl shape. And there is a part of the hair that kind of goes out of the frame in the image, and we're just gonna give it a little moment like that to close it in over here. Okay, so we're looking for kind of a jagged line here where the ends, the roots of the hair meet the scalp. So we're just looking for not a very like Bam Bam feel to it. Remember Bam Bam's hair on the Flintstones? Okay, so something like that. We're looking for something like that to get started. Just the basic outer shape. But then we have a few little flyaway moments and little curly sticking out like little curly fries. So we want to get some of those shapes in there. But right now we're just looking at the outer shapes, like what would be the silhouette, what would be the shadow being cast against a wall. I'm not worried about the inside of it yet, but we want to notice some of those particular flyaways. And that right there, just starting with that, starting with the overall, I see Autumn saying you're making me hungry talking about, I know, I'm hungry too. I want some curly fries now. So just starting with this. So this is step one. Step one is really find that shape. Think of like what the helmet of that hair would look like. What sort of silhouette does that hairstyle cast, right? So just the outer lines. And normally when it comes to contour lines, I'm always telling people, don't just think about the outer lines, the outlines, like you want to think about all of the elevation lines. But with hair, I really want you to think about the overall outer line shape to get started. And just that as step one is going to take you so much further than drawing each individual hair. Okay, so we've got the helmet, we've got the overall shape. Now we want to get an understanding of all of those contours, of all of those elevational shifts that are happening here. So we want to think about the fact that the head is round, it's spherical, it's not perfectly spherical. People have all different shapes of heads and skulls. Some people's heads are a little more square, a little more blocky. Some people's heads are a little more rounded and spherical. Some people's heads are a little more egg shaped. So just noticing the roundness of the head and the crown of the head is going to help us with the contours here because we've got all the hair stacked on top of the head. So we've got that cereal bowl shape that most of the hair against the scalp is following. So we'll just start to sketch the contours just like we would on a cereal bowl. And some of the strands of hair that we're seeing in the photograph really follow this elevational line that we're looking for here. And you can see that there's kind of an equator line right here where it becomes more straight. So it's curving out this way, curving out this way, curving out this way. And then right here, it's a little more straight, and then it starts to curve out the other direction. And then we've got this big curl over here that we'll worry about later. But first, let's just notice how the vertical axis hugs the outer edge of the cranium. And then in the center, it creates kind of a straight line. So that's just basic perspective here. And I've had a class in the past on the perspective of a coffee mug that could be really helpful if you just don't understand the perspective lines that I'm talking about here. Whoops, and then I just started sketching the horizontal axis without even looking. Oh my goodness. See, that's what happens when you go into autopilot and you don't look. So then we're looking before we start to draw what the lines on the horizontal axis are doing, because you might want to start to curve them that way, like I just did, thinking about the outer edge of a cereal bowl. But then when we look at, my son's name is Jack, at Jack's head, we need to have the feeling of this curve out towards us happening. And we can also see this like bulge that seems to curve in a downward direction. Let me get that iPad out of the way because it messes with my lighting. But we want a curve downward here. We want a downward curve. So hopefully, like, this is one of those moments where in a in-person class, I would say, like, check for understanding. Like, do y'all see that? I know you can respond in the chat and tell me if you're seeing that it's a more of a downward curve here, but we want it to come towards us in a certain way. And if you were to watch that perspective of a coffee mug class, I talk about where the viewer's eye line is. So who can tell me just from looking at the photograph, where was the person taking the photograph standing? Were they above the hair or were they below the hair? Were we looking down at this head or are we looking up at this head? So the person taking the photograph is above, looking down at my son's head. My ex-husband took this photo. And so there's a downward curve because the eye line is above. If we were looking at it from below, then maybe the lines would be curving up. So we're looking for that downward curve on the horizontal axis. And so the light is going to follow this particular curve that we're seeing. And I am not 100% happy with some of my lines. So I'm going to actually draw this again because I want to get that curl in there and I want to be more exact. So if you are looking at parts of yours and you know that you're going to just continue on with this drawing, it would be better to adjust things when you see moments that are off than to just let it ride. So I'm gonna just look a little more exactly here because I want to get this curl. So I'll put those other lines back in just a moment, but I'm gonna leave a little negative space over here for this curl. I'm just leaving some blank paper right there. And we're going to do that in all of these sketches because that little curl is one of these moments. It's kind of like when we're sketching a piece of fruit. If you leave out the bruises on the fruit or the little imperfections, not to say that the curls are an imperfection, but if you leave out those little characteristics, then you kind of delete the the unique qualities that that piece of fruit might have. So you want to leave in any little, you don't want to edit stuff like that out because that's affecting how the shape of the hair is. And it's also giving it like a little detail that gives it character. So just noticing how those contours shift around that little curl moment. And maybe even we can start to notice the contours on that curl. So on that curl, there's a curve like that because it's kind of bulging out towards us. And then on the vertical axis, it's like this. So we're really noticing all of these elevational shifts that are happening on these particular strands of hair. And so you don't have to draw the details on every strand of hair, but you notice these like key points where your eyes tend to go when you're looking at that person's hair, and you make sure that you get those details in there, and it's going to feel much more realistic that way. Okay, so we got our little curly fries over here, and we're going to draw this 3 more times. So we really want to notice these little negative space moments in the silhouette. If you're going to do it like me and draw it 3 or 4 separate drawings, which I recommend doing. The more you draw the same subject, the more familiar with it you're going to become. All right, and then we've got this fun little vortex happening up here on the bun. So it's twisted up, and it is we're going to call it the vertical axis, even though it's maybe not going vertically, it's going to appear a little more horizontal. But again, we can see what the particular strands of hair are doing, and we can see where this like little coiled shape is twisting and turning. And I can zoom in and draw this again on a separate piece of paper. It's kind of like a little cinnamon bun, right? A little cinnamon roll or a croissant, kind of radiating out like that from the center. So there's this center point, and maybe you draw it like a little triangle here. And then we want to notice, and you can see, I mean, the hair actually follows these curved lines. You can see the shadows are following these curved lines, how it's stacked on top of each other. So we're looking for that shape to start with. And there's a little piece of hair that kind of cuts over from this side to this side right here. So we want to put that in there because that's, again, that's another interesting moment or characteristic. We have this little flyaway moment right here. Okay, and then once we get the horizontal axis in there, I know that it all kind of feels a little horizontal there, but when we go the other direction, then I think that shape really starts to come across the 3 dimensions of it. So again, we're noticing where that bulge, that equator happens, because it kind of twists and turns in a few different ways here. But overall, it's creating a little circle or a vortex shape, kind of like at the center of an apple, where it's folding in on itself, right? So it's like one of those things at the mall where you put the penny in and it just goes around and around and around until it falls into the center of the hole. Okay. So it's not perfect like that. Like now I kind of want to erase it and draw it again because I drew it a little too perfect so that we could see it. But it twists and turns in some ways that are not super perfect. So it kind of twists more like this here. And then there's a little like part that's stacked a little higher right here. And noticing all those things are going to make it appear more realistic. So we really want to get those little dips and turns that are happening. Otherwise, if it looks too perfect, then you're probably drawing it more from your imagination and not looking. So looking is very important to this process. Studying, you might have to draw it a few times. That's something that I just have to remember to say to students is we've got to manage our expectations of ourselves. If this is your first time drawing something and you expect yourself to get it 100% perfect the first time and then you get frustrated because you don't, that's not cool at all. It's very rare that we do things perfectly the first time. We got to try them again and again and again. Sometimes more times than you think you need to, but eventually you'll get there. The learning curve is not straight and growth is not linear. It goes up and down. When we're learning, it looks like this. We're like, I'm learning. Feels like nothing's happening. Oh, hey, something happened. Oh, and then it goes back down, and then it goes back up, and then it goes back down, and then it kind of hovers around the same place for a while. And then all of a sudden, if you keep practicing and keep practicing, then it does this. It's like an exponential growth over time if you stick with it. That's what practice looks like. This is a practice chart. We gotta practice art. It's a daily practice. Okay. Anyway, so we got our step one, we got our contour lines. Now we're gonna do that again. We're gonna draw that outer shape again. And then we are going to just look at the highlights. So now we want to look at our reference photo that shows the photograph in a couple of different lights. And oh, this one where I inverted the light. So I took the black and white picture and inverted it. So all of the light shows up dark and all of the dark shows up light. This might have been more helpful to look at for step one to see that outer shape and to see all the negative space and the flyaways and the curly fries, but we're going to do that again. So we're going to draw that outer shape again, and I'm going to look at the inverted light photo this time for two reasons. One, because I think it's going to help me draw that outer shape a little better again, and then also because we're looking at the highlights in this step, and all of those highlighted shapes are what are showing up darker in this image, so it's a little easier to pick them out. A little more obvious. Also, this time I am not drawing a hard line around this shape. I'm letting some of my lines be a little broken and open, doing more of an implied line drawing. And I have done several classes for Michael's that are on YouTube talking about implied line. There was one last year that was really fun where we do a bunch of timed exercises that are not about speed, but they're about loosening up so you can get these open, broken, implied lines to happen. Okay, so we want to get those strands of hair in there because nobody's hair is a perfect helmet. If it looks like a perfect helmet, then it's probably fake hair, right? Or it's made of plastic. Even wigs are going to have little flyaway moments. So we're looking for those little strands, those little sticky outies right away. Don't have to put all of them in there, but definitely the ones that stick out from the silhouette here. Okay, so we got our outer shape. This is step 2. So we're looking for the highlights here. So in this inverted light photograph, all of the highlights are showing up dark. Maybe not black, but they are darker. And again, we don't have to draw the individual strands here. We're going to look for the shape of those highlights. So we're looking for just these little organic shapes. They might look like little lightning bolts. They might look like little crescent moons, but they are definitely following these contours of the elevational shifts that we just drew. So I'm just going to draw the ones that I'm seeing that are jumping out at me. Let me get my iPad away because I'm like, I want it close so I can see them, but then I don't want it to mess up the light of the zoom. So I'm just going to have to look back and forth a lot. Okay, so these can really help if you were kind of forcing some sort of vortex lines on the bun before, then now should be pretty easy to see which directional flow. Oh, I'm seeing somebody saying Barbie has perfect hair. There you go. Yeah, or it's doll hair, right? Okay, but these shapes really do tell us that directional flow. So this is what I mean by the light tells you everything you need to know. You don't necessarily even have to have an understanding of the contours because the light is going to follow the contours. So if you just draw what the light is telling you, then you will be fine. But it's helpful to notice those elevational shifts as well. And then this was the moment where there was that one piece of hair that was kind of going from one side to another at the top there. And yeah, there's a bunch of little detailed moments, but we're just looking for the big shapes of highlights. So these are the ones that are showing up black in the inverted light photo. Sometimes it's hard to switch your brain over from looking at the inverted light photo and remembering that these are the highlights that we're looking at. So if it helps you to look at the black and white photo and draw the highlights, do it, whatever works for you. But I find this to be helpful to me. Okay, and then it's a pretty dark photo. His hair is pretty dark there in the shadows of the scalp. So, and some of these, this is one thing about this inverted filter. Sometimes it kind of blows it out. It makes everything that's dark kind of whiter in the reverse because there are more highlights here than what I feel like are showing up here. So it might be easier to look at the black and white photo for the highlights on the scalp. For some reason, those didn't translate in that inverted photo like I would have liked them to. But again, we're just looking at the highlights. So I'm just looking for those shapes of highlights and they're going to follow the contours. And some of this is, you know, the hair is just lighter, the light's hitting it, or it could be that, you know, we're seeing some of the scalp a little bit because the way the hair is tied back like this, you know, kind of an uneven hairline here. Just noticing those highlighted shapes. And then this is the moment over here where that one curl that was sticking out really sticks out with the light. Okay, so we got the highlights. And if you're just gonna put this all together in one drawing, and you're at this point and you've already got the contour lines on there, I would maybe go ahead and erase the contour lines and let's just focus on the light going forward. If you're putting it all together, if you're doing separate drawings like me, then it's all the same. All right, so we're gonna go to step 3, which is looking at the shadows. We can't have light without darkness, right? I say that all the time, and sometimes people are like, oh, it's so deep. And sometimes I forget how deep that line is because it's like, well, yeah, obviously. Talking about drawing, but yes, in life, sometimes we don't want to deal with the darkness, but we can't see the light without the darkness to contrast it. Okay, so I'm starting with that overall outer shape again with all of these. I'm starting with the helmet of Barbie hair. And I'm using kind of a broken implied line. And if you can't see my lines yet, I'll make them a little darker in just a minute. They'll show up the more I draw. And each time I do this is what I like about doing multiple drawings of the same subject. Each time I do it, I'm starting to get more accurate to what the hair shape actually looks like. So that's why I wanted to break it up this way. And I'm hoping that y'all are doing it just like me and doing 4 separate drawings. But it's totally fine if you're just combining them all together as well. All right. So looking for that outer shape. And then we got to get our little flyaways. All those little characteristics of this particular hair shape. And I know that we are just drawing this one particular photo of hair here, but this method can be applied to any type of hair. So if we're drawing an afro, we're going to look for the whole big shape of the afro and some of those little curly moments that might be sticking out, which there will be a lot of them, but you just want to pick like some all over. I like to think about a map, like north, south, east, and west, and pick like a few details in the north, a few details in the south, a few details in the east and the west. And overall, when we look at it, we'll see it. But you definitely, with lots of little, I'm thinking about Prince. We were just talking about Prince at the bit before the class started, and I've drawn a photograph of Prince because I love Prince. I've drawn him quite a bit for demonstrations for in-person classes, and that's one photo that I like to use. He's got an afro, and it's start with that big outer shape, and then I just look for little detail frizzy moments all over the head. But you don't need all of them in there. Okay, so we've got that outer shape again to start with. And then now we're looking for the shadows. So if we were using the inverted light photo for this, it wouldn't be as helpful because it kind of just washed out. It made all of the darks kind of all show up white. So I don't find that very helpful. I think the inverted light photo is the most helpful for finding that outer silhouette shape and for looking at the highlights. But for the shadows, I think we should look at the true to light photo. because we can see the most variation in the shadows. You could look at the black and white one as well, but I turned up the contrast on that one. So a lot of the shadows kind of all fused together there. All right, so there's just a lot of shadows is what I'm saying. There's going to be a lot of shapes for the shadows here. And if you're combining all of these together, it might be easy to get a little lost because you already drew the highlights and get confused about what's what. So that's why I think drawing it separately is good, because we're training our brain to see all these different light shapes, because the light is telling us everything we need to know. So I want to stop for a minute here and do just a quick little tutorial about value, just because I know sometimes we have some new folks or absolute beginners that might need this. So I've got an 8B pencil here. I'm going to switch to my 12B, and I'm just going to do a little value scale from 0 to 10. So 10 being our absolute black, using the side of my pencil, and I'm making it nice and solid to where there's no paper showing through. And actually, let me draw a little long skinny rectangle for myself here. So we've got 0 on one end, 10 on the other of our value scale. And so we want it to be an absolute black, solid black shadow with a 10. And then I'm letting up on my pressure, letting it be a little darker to blend. And then I'm looking for an even mid-tone here in the middle. And then I want to blend those out so that it gradually shifts from dark to a mid-tone. And then I'll switch to a lighter pencil, like I don't have a 2B handy right here. I'll use my 4B. Just to have more of a gradual shift happening here. And then for the lighter side, I might use a 2B a little bit into the lighter side, but then I'm going to switch to my H pencil. And I really want some of those really light values to feel just like a baby's breath on the page. So the 0 is going to be your blank paper. Those are those absolute highlights. Absolute white or blank paper, and the 10 is the absolute black. And then we've got all the midtones in between. So we're going to draw all of the shadows from, like, really, we want to get all of them in there, even a 1 and a 2 on the value scale. Even though they're going to be super light. Well, maybe some of those highlights might be more a 1 or a 2 on the value. So some of the highlights that we drew might fall more in the category of this part of our value scale. And you can use your eraser to blend this out. We're going to be doing a lot of really soft, gradual shifts with our value today. So we just want a nice, smooth, continuous tonal shading blend to happen. So it's good to start thinking about that now and warming up for that. I'm just switching between some of my pencils, my H's and my B's. So you want to use your H pencils for those really light values, and then your B pencils for this darker value. And your little value scale that you sketch here doesn't have to be perfect. Just looking for, because mine is not perfect. This needs to be more of a gradual shift there, but anyway. Okay, so now let's look at these shadows and start drawing in the shadows that we're seeing. We're going to start with the 10s with the absolute black, where we're just going to draw them as empty shapes. So there's like a little triangle moment of a shadow up here that's like a 10. Let's draw all the 10s first. And some of the 10s may shift into being more 8s or 9s as they go. But there's this big dark moment right here. And we're just leaving it empty, just drawing the empty shape. This can be tricky for some people to leave it alone and just draw it as an empty shape. But this is very helpful if you want to do any painting with like watercolor or any kind of painting. Just leave it empty and then you're kind of creating a paint by numbers situation for yourself. But I know the temptation to just go ahead and start shading it in is always there. I mean, do whatever you want. I'm not the boss of you, but I'm trying to just focus on these shapes and have this understanding of the shape. So I kind of started looking at some of the lighter ones, but now I want to go back to looking for those darker ones over here. And then there's a very dark black moment here in these areas around this curl, because again, we can't have light without shadow. And so if we've got the light coming forward, then it's probably, you know, there's some depth underneath it, because having a high elevation point is by default creating a low elevation point next to it. Usually like the peak of a mountain, there's going to be a shadow on the other side. Or if we've got a cave, there's going to be light hitting the edge of the cave. Okay, so we're looking for just those dark recesses and those shadows, and they're usually going to fall right next to a highlight. And there's some really dark black. It almost feels like a little drippy spider web or something right here if we were to draw just the whole shape of it. And then over here, there's another big dark area. And they're all following those contours. All right, so we're looking for something like that for the shadows. So again, you can apply this method to any type of hair. You're going to look for that whole outer shape of the hair. You're going to look for the highlights. You're going to look for the shadows, and you're going to notice the elevational flow of the hair, or maybe as it's hugging the scalp, all of those contour lines. So that is step 3. And then now we're ready to put it all together and start adding this soft tonal value to it. I'm kind of like, maybe I should just keep going with this one, but I'm gonna do it one more time. We've got time. We've got 40 minutes left in the class. So I'm gonna sketch it one more time. And this time I'm gonna really try to nail that shape. I was giving myself permission to be a little off with it with those others, but with this one, I want to really get as close to the overall silhouette of the hair, which actually I'm going to go back to the inverted light photo for this one. And when I'm drawing the outer shape, I think the inverted light photo is the most helpful. That's this one.
Autumn says when she first learned shading, she stopped making art with harder pencil lines. Now she has a hard time not shading.
Oh, interesting. That's good that you got away from the hard pencil lines, although That's a preference. I try not to push my preference on people too much. I'm teaching a portrait drawing class right now with live models. And when I taught that class previously, most people are looking for realism when they draw portraits, but sometimes people just naturally have a stylized way that they draw. And if I'm trying to help people achieve realism, then I usually do want them to soften their lines and really look at what the light is doing. But then I had a student who last year in that class who just had this very stylized way of drawing with really hard edged lines. And they were really achieving likeness with the model. And so I just tried to encourage them in ways to, you know, improve in ways that they wanted. But then finally towards the end of the class, they did say that they wanted to soften their lines. But I have to remind myself that not everybody wants to achieve realism. That is not, you know, the be all and end all of art making. And there's a lot of art that I make where I'm not trying to achieve realism. I'm looking for more a mood or a vibe or an emotion. So we have to decolonize the way we think about art, what all the old white guys in Europe were doing isn't isn't the best and the thing everybody wants to do, but a lot of people are looking for realism, and our class today is about realism, so we are focused on it today. Just a little aside about we don't need to shame hard edged lines. They have their place and can be really fun, and I encourage people to do whatever brings them joy. Okay, so I've got that outer shape. And I'm really looking at the negative space over here for these shapes and kind of drawing more the little keyhole space moments. Because I'm trying to get it more exact with this one, because this is the last one where we're going to add all the value. I'm making sure that I've got these hairs in the right place, because actually, especially this one hair, I don't know if y'all noticed this, like as if it's some big reveal. This hair is the curl that we've been talking about is like creating it, it's all connected. This is connected right here. It's all the same curl. I think that's what it looks like to me anyway, the way I drew it in my other final drawing. I connected it so it felt like that little curl connects right there. Maybe that was me making it a little more stylized, but I want to connect. Oh, thank you, Alexis. Just added the comment. I enjoy all of these art classes. I have been thinking maybe I should make a little book, a little of all my how to draw things, because I definitely have a formula that I follow when drawing anything. I think it would make a pretty good little guidebook. I'm gonna write that book. As soon as I finish writing the other book I've been trying to write for 5 years. Maybe I'll write that one first. It might be easier. A little drawing guide, like a little text, not a textbook. Y'all know what I'm saying. A guidebook. Okay, so I'm putting those highlights in first. I'm just doing everything I did, but I'm combining all of the steps together. So I know I'm drawing kind of light right now, but I'll get darker as I start to add them in. And I'm just following all the steps that we already did together, but now I'm just combining it. So first I'm looking at those highlights, and then I'm starting to put in the shadows. I feel like I missed a couple of this one little flyaway right here. I love how it sticks out like a little rainbow. That curl comes up like a little rainbow. Make sure I get that one in there in that particular way. Okay, so now I'm starting to look at those big shadowy shapes. And this is where accuracy is going to help you not get lost. And you can even now start to use some of these flyaways as little anchors to not get lost. So like this little indention here between the bun and the hair, we can look at, um, that as an anchor to help us not get lost. Or this little triangle of shadow right here happens right underneath the part that sticks out right there. So just notice the relationships of some of these shapes to each other. The drawing drapery class that I've done, which it's been a while since I've revisited that subject matter, but was early on. I've been teaching these classes for Michael's for 3.5 years now, but early on in the series, we did drawing drapery. And I say the same thing when drawing drapery because it's just pure value. And it's really easy to get lost when you're drawing cloth. But if you can be as exact as possible, you can find it on YouTube, the drawing drapery class. And maybe I'll revisit that one day soon. I'm planning for April right now. That would be a nice one to do again since it's been a while. But yeah, it's good to try with a lot of subjects, like I was just talking about how sometimes it's nice to be loose and more aesthetic and get the impression, like with organic things like a tree. I always say it doesn't have to look like that tree. We just want it to look like a tree. So we want to get some detailed aspects of that tree, but then other ways we can kind of let it be a little looser. But with hair and with drapery, you're just going to get lost if you don't get it as accurate as possible. So you really don't want to imagine, or if you realize that like, oh, the fold is kind of off right there, but I'll just keep going, it might lead to you getting completely lost with your drawing because you're constantly having to um like course correct yourself, like, oh, right, I fudged that moment, so I have to keep fudging everything around it. It's easier to just erase it and get it more exact. So that's what I've been doing up here. I'm like erasing and trying to get this shape more exact the way I see it, because I want all these particular strands of highlights to fall in the right place in my drawing so that I don't get lost when I start to add the value. So I'm really noticing those shadow shapes. And I realize that the light, since I'm drawing so lightly right now and I'm moving my hand around a lot, that it's kind of making some of the drawing hard to see. Just hang tight. I'm just doing exactly what I did in those other drawings, and I am about to start adding the dark value, and that will make it come across a lot more. So I'm just getting more accurate in all these moments. And there's definitely, like, if you think about that map, like north, south, east, and west, the whole thing doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but definitely in the areas that you're focusing on, you want to make it more accurate because there is like this whole part of the hair right here that's actually kind of, it's a little chaotic, right? And I made it more uniform in my drawing. So there are things that you can kind of edit for your own sanity. Like we're not going to get as accurate in this area, but up here, I think being as accurate as possible is going to help us not get lost. Because we want that little twist in the bun to come across. That's definitely, and we want this little curl to come across, those interesting moments where our eyes go. But like in this whole area, we can just make it nice and soft and gradual. We don't have to be 100% accurate, because like every morning when I tie my son's hair up, we always tie it up before he goes to school, just because he's got a lot of hair and I don't want it, you know, in his face all day long. Anyway, sometimes I tie it and I'm like, I gotta do it again. There's way too many bumps. It's all crazy looking. And he's like, I don't care.
Lan has a general question about your process.
Yes.
So, when you're putting together all the features and the elements of a human portrait, what do you like to start with, and how do you kind of work that process out of starting with hair or eyes, I guess?
Oh, so I always start with going very general to specific. So I look at the diagram of a human head, and I've had classes on basic facial proportions for children and adults. And so if you check out those classes, that shows like the diagram of a head, and that's what I would start with, is the diagram, and then get more specific after that. But I'm always going to be looking for the light uh, early on, those value shapes of light and dark. All right, that's a good question though. Thank you. Okay, so I want to start adding the value. I love how Rich is always quoting me in the chat, like when I
You have
said,
great quotes. You have great
"Aw,
quotes.
thank you." Um, okay, I'm gonna write step 4 up here. Okay, so I'm going to start pretty dark here. I've got this 12B pencil, and I'm holding my pencil to this on the side parallel to the paper, because I want everything that I do to be nice and soft. So I don't want to hold my pencil like this while I'm shading. And if you find it hard to hold your pencil like this, just be mindful of how soft you're being with the value. I'm going to start in those darkest areas, in those 10 areas, and following those contours, those elevational shifts that we've been talking about, start to build up these dark areas. And where it goes to absolute 10, where it goes absolute black, I can start to put more pressure on it to make it kind of go into the surface of the paper. But letting it be nice and soft is definitely going to help us achieve the texture of the hair that we're going for. So, just be aware of the type of hair that you're drawing and what the texture of the hair is. And if it is soft, then you want your lines to be soft. And I talk about that in the drapery class too. Sometimes I'll have people, before we start drawing, even ask them, what are some adjectives we would use to describe drapery? And hair is a lot like drapery. The more I'm bringing up drapery, the more it feels very relevant. So people will say soft, flowy. I love the word fluid when people use that word to describe the drapery. And so, like, okay, so we want our lines and the marks that we're making on the page to follow those same adjectives. So if we're trying to achieve that texture of soft, fluid, flowy, we need the marks that we're making to be soft and fluid and flowy. So I'm just keeping it nice and soft and gradual, using the side of the pencil, kind of using these tiny little circles to build up those absolute darks. and I'm definitely pushing down on my pencil a lot in the areas where it does go to solid black. I might go ahead and start to use the tip of my pencil a little bit more in some areas to speed up the process. And then you kind of switch every once in a while to going to the tip of the pencil, and you can start to put in some of these like individual strands. So you're not drawing every individual strand, but you definitely want to create this fluidity, this fluidness. What is the word? Is fluidity a word? Fluidness? Uh, get out the Scrabble dictionary. So sometimes like big sweeping movements with your arm, like we did another recent drawing. It was my son's hair again for the drawing ears class. And for the hair, I was doing these big sweeping arm movements to get, because his hair was down in that picture. But we can do the same sort of thing here as we're building up these shadows. We can kind of flick our wrist. So you can lock your wrist and move more of your arm to get these big sweeping movements to happen. Or you can stick your elbow out and flick your wrist a little bit, come at it from some different places on the paper. So it feels like we're drawing individual strands, but we're not. We're looking more at these big swaths of value, these big areas of value that are all going to end up pretty dark. And by using those different hand or arm movements, we're able to keep it soft and also follow the contours of the hair. So I'm really using my whole arm to draw, which is something I go into, like the muscle memory of starting to do that in the class on graphite basics for beginners. And I believe Rich dropped the link to the playlist that the Michaels folks gave me that has a lot of my classes all in one place on YouTube. So I'm just building up those areas of dark value. I'm jumping around quite a bit too. I find that really helps me. If I know some people like to just fully develop one area that they're drawing at a time. And I tend to like to jump around a lot because then I can start to see where it's going a little faster. But that again is a preference. If you prefer to fully develop it in one place and then make your way around in that way, do whatever works best for you.
Cecilia asked, "Are we using the paper stumps to blend this?"
I am not going to use paper stumps or tortillions. You are welcome to use them. I have a bit of an issue when it comes to drawing like this and using the tortillions for a lot of beginners, because we're really layering a lot of value here. We can do all of the blending with just our pencils. Sometimes the people rely on the tortillions too much, and they kind of, I think the tortillions can sometimes blur out details, and maybe people don't use as much graphite, and so they're kind of just smudging the graphite that they did put down around, if that makes sense. So if you're really happy with them, with the effect that you get when you use them, then by all means use them if you have them. But I want us to really get a sense of how to do this without them. So we definitely don't need them. And yeah, sometimes I think you'll do all this beautiful blending with your pencils, and then you'll take the tortillion and they can kind of just like take away that detail because they smudge them, but they have their place for sure. I used them a lot in the drawing eyes and noses class that I did recently over the summer. I did a whole series of all the facial features. And yeah, to get like the soft value around the nose, I just used a dirty tortillion. you can get that really soft, you can use it to get your softest value. So maybe if you have them, you could use them instead of your H pencils to get the really soft highlights that we're going to put in here soon. So yeah, maybe let me go ahead and start putting some of the highlights in there. I'll switch to an H pencil. Okay, so in these areas of highlights, that's where we want, again, this big sweeping motion using the side of the pencil, but we just want it to be nice and soft. And again, we're not drawing every individual hair, but we are getting some details in there. So we want some individual hair strands and pieces, but mostly we just want to keep this energy of all of the value following these contour lines, following this elevational shift here. So in these highlights, they're not 100% blank paper. So we want some light value in here, and that's going to start to gradually shift the value in those light areas from like a 0 to a 1, because right now we just have them blank, but they're really more like a 1 or a 2 on the value scale. But we can also use the H pencil like this, nice and soft, and get these more blended moments to happen. I think I'm going to switch back to a nice dark B pencil to get more of these. So it's a very dark image. There's lots of dark value. So I'm using the side of the pencil to kind of build up a nice dark area of volume, but I'm still following those contours, and then shift to the more of the front of the pencil to get the impression of more individual strands. And especially here by these highlights, we want to go really dark because we want this to feel like as dark as it is in the photo, and we want that light moment to come forward. So we're trying to create that contrast from dark to light. And a lot of people have a fear of going super dark with their values. They keep everything pretty light because they're afraid to go to a solid black because then they won't be able to erase it. But that's where the whole idea of we can't have light without dark comes in. We really need it to go as dark black as it appears in the photograph so that we can get this high contrast to happen. I'm sharpening this 8B again. And I can use that to really get it nice and solid, dark inside of our little vortex here. But trying to be careful not to just color it in all one direction. Got to make sure that I'm keeping with those elevational shifts. I'm looking back and forth to my photograph. One thing that could be helpful that I didn't put on the supply list, but is an eraser, a pencil, a little, I have one from Michael's. It's not Artist Loft. It is, I'm blanking on the brand that makes it. But you could erase out some of these highlights. Like you could just put in all your value and then use that little detail eraser that looks like a pencil to erase out some of those little highlighted strands. So yeah, some of these little moments I'm really looking at the detail that I'm seeing in those curves. I'm going to pay some attention to all those little flyaways that we kept talking about. Really build up and blend those values that we're seeing on those. So I'm really putting a lot of heavy pressure on my pencil in the areas where the value goes super dark, following those contours. And I'm shifting the direction of my hand quite frequently. So I'm coming at the paper from different directions so that I can keep these big sweeping arm movements happening while still following the contours. If you're always approaching the paper with your hand from the same direction, it might be kind of hard to change the direction of those movements. So this is the moment where right here in the hair, I'm kind of just following the overall elevation here. I'm not necessarily looking at all the dips and turns that are happening here because as I was saying before, it's a little chaotic right there with some of those bumps in the hair. So I'm mostly just getting the idea of what's happening there. And then here at the edge, I do want to pay a little more attention because there's like little baby hairs. But then I will erase this line. That line actually doesn't exist. It's more of a soft implied line by the way all the hair that's growing. Stops and starts. You do want some little individual strands of hair, but you just don't need every individual strands of hair. It's more the shapes of the shadows and the shapes of the light. That's the trick. And really paying attention to where those highlights are so you're not accidentally covering them all up. With this little curl over here, just really sketching all the dark value around it. And then maybe use my H pencil for the light value that I'm seeing on the highlighted part. We're almost out of time here. I'm just gonna add a few details to some things like that. And then I think I'm just gonna switch to my other drawing. So it can be like a cooking show here and just because I definitely took my time a little more with this. It's all the same thing, but I definitely took my time to add all this value and go a little more slowly than I just went here. So really taking the time to like slowly blend out from these dark to light moments and do that little sweeping movement. So you're doing like these big areas of soft value, and then you're doing these little individual strands or the illusion of individual strands because you're not putting them everywhere, but you're adding them in a way that follows the contours, how you're seeing them in the photo. And then the last thing that really makes it come to life is to do some big sweeping movements like this, noticing these like stray hairs, these are individual flyaways, and adding some of those with an H pencil or a nice light pencil. Just all those little individual strands of hairs, just a few of those coming off, and that's really gonna make it feel nice and realistic to have some of those. All right. See, we got 8 minutes left here. I'd love to see some of y'all's drawings. You want to hold them up and we can spotlight you and see how you did? This is Emma. Oh, you got that blurry background. Blurred it all out. All right, Kate. Yeah, you're just slowly building up that value. Yes, I can tell you're just following those contours and staying nice and soft. Keep going. That looked amazing. All right, Mrs. Barbara. Yeah, Barbara, that looks so good. Oh, I'm really feeling the vortex and that little baby man bun. And Karen. Okay, yes. Nice and soft. Following those contours. I really see that one curl coming to life over there on the side. That's great. Oh wow, Patty. Yes, look at that. You got that little shine at the edge there of the bun. Oh wow. Beautiful. That is just you did it. You nailed it. You got that glowing effect. All right, Arthur. Love to see you. That's lovely. Yeah, nice and soft. All right, and this Autumn. Oh yeah, Autumn, look at your soft lines. Oh, I love how you really paid attention to those, that twist, all the twists and turns up there in the bun. Oh, and your little curl, that is really coming forward. Yes. There's Sandra. Yeah, that's lovely. I'm really feeling all the dips and turns and in that bun as well. Oh, wow. Yes. Talk about that high contrast. That is really coming along. That looks great. And I love how you got that one little curly hair coming forward too. I really feel the elevation on that. That's gorgeous. All right. Wow, y'all, that was so fun. Y'all did such amazing work. That is so rewarding. I just cannot even tell you how great that feels at the end of a class to see all those beautiful hair drawings. Okay, so next week we've got the alcohol-based marker class, blending alcohol-based markers. Cannot remember the exact name of the class, but it's up there. You can follow my link tree to find it. It's on the Michael's website where you signed up for this one. You can sign up for those two classes. Thank you, Autumn, for your lovely feedback. And don't forget to tag your work wherever you share your work. Make it with Michael's or Michael's classes. And that's it. That's all I've got. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Rich. We'll see you. See you next time.